Good evening. My name is Neil Astley, and I'm the editor of Bloodaxe, and I'd like to welcome you to our November online launch for three very different books, but you'll probably find quite a lot of correlations between them. We have Marie Howe, who normally lives in New York, who's currently in San Francisco, and she is launching this beautiful book, which is her first UK retrospective, What the Earth Seemed to Say, and it draws on four collections published in the US, as well as some remarkable new work. And then we have Philip Gross with his latest collection, his 22nd collection, The Shores of Vaikus, or Vaikus, which takes you to Estonia, the country where his refugee father, came from. And then we also have David Constantine with his new translation, A Bird Called Elaeus. And that's a selection that he's made from the Greek anthology of poems many of which are very relevant to the state of the world or state of the earth now. David has published 5 translations with Bloodaxe, and he's also published with other publishers some remarkable translations of Goethe and Brecht, and for Bloodaxe, he's particularly well known for his translations of Hölderlin. So we're going all over the world with this reading. So it truly is an international reading. David is in Oxford and Philip is in South Wales. So I'd like to start by welcoming Marie Howe from San Francisco to read from What the Earth Seemed to Say. Marie, you'd like to come on.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Neil Astley, for publishing this book, for all the work you do in the world to bring beautiful writing to the world. I'm honored to be published by Bloodaxe. I'm honored to be reading with Philip Gross and David Constantine, and I'm delighted to be with you all right at this moment. So this is a new and selected poems, and it's I'm going to read a poem that is from my very first book, a short, small prose poem called Part of Eve's Discussion. Eve, as you remember, was once living in a garden, and then she wasn't. So this is part of what she has to say. It was like the moment when a bird decides not to eat from your hand and flies, just before it flies. The moment the rivers seem to still and stop because a storm is coming, but there is no storm. As when 100 starlings lift and bank together before they wheel and drop, very much like the moment driving on bad ice, when it occurs to you, your car could spin just before it slowly begins to spin, like the moment just before you forgot what it was you were about to say. It was like that. And after that, it was still like that, only all the time. The second book I published is called What the Living Do, and it's centered around questions of gender and childhood, and but the real center of the book is my brother John. I'm one of 9 children. My family of origin, John was one of my brothers, very, very close friend to me and a kind of spiritual teacher to me, although he was 11 years younger than I. And so I want to read just a couple of poems that have to do with him. He used to say something to me over and over again over the years, and what he says is in this poem. It's called The Gate. My brother died of AIDS in the late 80s. He was young. He was 28 years old. The gate. I had no idea that the gate I would step through to finally enter this world would be the space my brother's body made. He was taller than me, a young man, but grown, himself by then, done at 28, having folded every sheet, rinsed every glass he would ever rinse under the cold and running water. This is what you have been waiting for, he used to say to me. And I would say, what? And he would say, this, holding up my cheese and mustard sandwich. And I would say, what? And he would say, this, sort of looking around. I wrote a series of poems that are stories about John. And when I was trying to finish this book, I was working on a number of them and none of them were working out. And finally, after a day of work, I just pushed everything aside and decided to write a letter to my dear dead brother. And from that letter, this poem came. It's called What the Living Do. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there. And the Drano won't work, but smells dangerous. And the crusty dishes have piled up, waiting for the plumber I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky's a deep, headstrong blue, and the sunlight pours through the open living room windows because the heat's stuck on too high in here and I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking, I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrist and sleeve, I thought it again and again later when buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking, slamming the car door shut in the cold, what you called that yearning, what you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call, a letter, a kiss. We want more and more, and then more of it. But there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you. And in this section, I would like to end my part of this reading with a poem called The Singularity, which was written after Stephen Hawking. And it refers to the singularity that was the minute, tiny bit of matter that blew up with the Big Bang, into everything we know so far. The singularity. It was written just after Stephen Hawking died. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Remember? There was no nature, no them, no tests to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reef feels pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean. And before that, to when sky was earth and animal was energy and rock was liquid and stars were space and space was not at all, nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important, before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it? What once was before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no was. Only a tiny, tiny dot brimming with is, 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 is. All, everything, home. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you very much for those poems of the moment, very much so of the moment, in all kinds of ways. And we'll hear from Marie a bit later again. We're now going to hear from Philip Gross, who's going to take us to Estonia.
Thank you, and what a pleasure to be part of this braid of 3 different strands, but still it feels like a braid. Now, everything I read this evening will be to do with a place, a landscape. It's a real external landscape, Estonia, but it is an inner one too. There's the big voice of the forest, wind that floods like a river not contained to banks or gradient, a river that can wander, that sinks away and reappears at will. Wind leaning onto the tops, a long, slow wave that doesn't exhaust itself breaking. And there's the small voice, never quite exhausted either. Bend, bend, a few of us break, but we bend. There's the big voice, big wind rolling here and there, whichever way it's marching. And small voices, one here, one there, not quite where you look or when you look, not there again. For the first half of my life, Estonia featured as a silence. It was all the things of which my father never spoke, some of which I heard and even wrote about later. But that isn't what I'm doing here. This book comes from my own encounters with Estonia, often in places where my father never went, like those offshore islands in the Baltic Sea. However, this isn't a travel book about Estonia. The place called Vaikus is an Estonia, one that spoke to me through friends and family and through the place itself. It's also a state of mind, a disposition, a kind of inwardness I've come to value more and more in a louder, more extrovert world. Inside the empty cartridge case, a bird flock scattering forever from a point where past and future are impacted. Time there never moves again. Inside the forest, an unravelment of paths through the same darkness, convergences too, but they're only meeting to remind each other no two are the same. Inside the empty house, door skewed on a hinge, a family of silences have settled, bickering now and then the way families do. You can knock, they won't hear. Inside the night, outside the window, yes, even the outside has an inside of its own, dim, intricate creatures weaving their cocoons around our history. Inside, the sound of leaves and wires, Their rough translations of the wind. Poor wind, it has no voice of its own. 100 synonyms for far, far, far. Inside the days where I live are others where I never was or will be. If I speak to them, they answer me by name, as if they know me through and through. Inside the word, this word or the next you can think, the scuff and scratch of human voice is just out of reach. Inside here, elsewhere. Inside, elsewhere. Here. This word Vaikus is one of several Estonian words for silence. Not in the negative sense of being silenced, though there's been plenty of that in a long history of occupations. It's been part, currently, of at least 4 different empires. The nearest to Vaikus in English might be holding one's peace. A few more steps into that landscape. Wind in the reed beds, more than head high, rushes swaying as the wind leans on them, one way then the other. I've come looking for the edge, the tangled coast I saw from a mile high, up among the airwaves. Finnish, Russian, Swedish, German, several slants of English and Estonian, airwaves tangling till they are the calling of migrating birds. From up there, it looked clear. Down here, it's close, but never there to touch. Wind in the reed beds. For a moment, a wind path opens like the Red Sea, as if something passed through. Close. Something web-foot, not minding that the ground has gone beneath it, water glittering between the stems. Turn back. At the end of the track, a wooden house. From somewhere, family voices. And a child, it must be, practicing a trumpet, none too well. When I get there, the house is empty, as if it's been empty for years. Even in a tiny country, there's a kind of forest that goes on forever. You drive for an hour on a straight road, straight and flat. You never reach a rise to see beyond. Instead, right and left, bare trunks of spruces, like fencing. Then, like a crack in the surface of seeing, one chance glimpse could open and close, two shutter quick to unsee, even if you wanted, and it's let you in. I'll finish this part with listening a bit closer to that particular eloquent kind of silence. A forest, a real one. I could give you day, time, map location, the coordinates between the chance of a clearing and a cloud that passing sets a shape of light amongst us, sculptural, a standing form of silence. Centuries of rusty spruce mulch underfoot and a catch in the wind's breath, urgent as a heartbeat mist. A stillness in which, if a single thing falls, one dry needle or this whole phenomenal world, it would be, in a way that in this life we never are, entirely heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. And we're now going to go not just to Greece, but back in time to ancient Greece via David Constantine's remarkable translations from the Greek anthology. David.
Just a word quickly about the Greek anthology. That's one volume of a modern edition, 5 of that. It's an anthology of about 4,500 poems composed over more than 1,500 years by about 300 authors. A colossal continuity out of that vast wealth is arranged, so to speak, here in my smaller version, kaleidoscopically, to make what I hoped would be telling juxtapositions. The continuity in the thing itself is vast. It runs from classical times through Roman into Byzantine. The poems I'll read this evening are a very few in an arrangement just for them. I thought of the whole thing, although it's bound to be static as words on the page, as a kind of kaleidoscope that you might shake and then there'd be different poems next to other ones and form a sort of kaleidoscope in that sense, different continuities and readings. The first one I'll read is thematic throughout, really. There are several on this topic. This one is anonymous. The way to Hades is straight down. You leave from here or cross an ocean to an elsewhere. Never fear. Wherever you arrive, it is a place of departure. A wind sets fair for Hades from every quarter. This is a poem by Asclepiades. Another, I should have said perhaps that they are largely quatrains, that is, poems in 4 lines, and the form within that I've chosen is generally rhyming, but sometimes syllabically, and sometimes lines that, or poems that have imitated the Greek hexameter, pentameter. So they're quatrains mainly. Sweet in summer to the thirsty is a draught of snow, and sweet to sailors after winter gales are the zephyrs of spring. But when they share their bodies' gifts and honour Cypris doing so, 2 lovers under one cloak are the sweetest thing. The next poem is by Sappho. Very, very little of Sappho has survived entire, and 2 of the very few are in the anthology, the Greek anthology. There would be no time. I mean, essentially, my book itself is inadequate to talk about the vast variety of it, but there are certain things that do recur, and the loss of young women, either in childbirth or just before their weddings or things like that, is one very remarkable and recurring topic. This is a quatrain by Sappho. Timas, approaching her wedding day, has come to dust. She drifts as a wraith in the house of Persephone now. We, her companions, same age as her, for her we must razor our hair, our lovers loved and ran their fingers through. I've taken quite a lot of liberties and trust that they wouldn't have minded. It seems a pretty generous and benevolent setup, the whole arrangement. I should have said earlier on, there's only one extant copy of the original Greek anthology, and it's in the Palatine Library in Heidelberg. Just one copy. This is anonymous, and it's a prayer for Aminticus, who is the, as it were, hero or particular subject of the poem. And I largely had my father-in-law in mind when I made this poem out of a smaller original. My father was my father-in-law was a passionate gardener in Cornwall, and was hard to get away from Cornwall actually, and from his garden. Mother Earth, remembering how he laboured for you, take the old man Aminticus into your lap. He planted many ever-leafing olives in you, and with the vines of Bacchus made you splendid. For your thirst, and for the music he channeled clear water over you. He raised your oats and barley, pot herbs, the figs, the apples, the luscious peaches, so that you would look your best under the sun, and the heavens would pause over you in delighted contemplation. So for his skills and courtesy, beloved earth, lie now gently on him who never stamped or marched on you, never burdened you with sloth, nor disfigured you for lucre, but loved the curving line and honoured the contours. Cover this local man sweetly, and wreath in spring his grey head with your flowers. And the last one in this first half, and again, it's a poem. In fact, there were two versions by two completely separate poets, and I amalgamated them into a single one that suited me. The two in question are Apollonides and Antiphanes of Megalopolis. They had splendid names, lots of them. This was the spring, above all others around here, the nymphs loved and praised. She ran cold and pure, sweet on the parched throat, ever abundant, clear, till a man came and washed his soiled hands in her, and she shrank back into the dark. The nymphs too went elsewhere. The road in horror makes a detour. Only the very thirsty, hoping against hope, like you, traveller, will come and kneel for what's not there.
Thank you very much, David. And now we're going to hear again from Marie Howe. Marie, can you come in? David, can you switch off?
Hello, I love hearing these poems by both of these poets. The road in horror makes a detour, the thing to say. It's extraordinary. I'm going to read three new poems. The first one is called Postscript. What we did to the earth, we did to our daughters, one after the other. What we did to the trees, we did to our elders, stacked in their wheelchairs by the lunchroom door. What we did to our daughters, we did to our sons, calling out for their mothers. What we did to the trees, what we did to the earth, what we did to our sons, to our daughters, what we did to the cows, to the pig, to the lamb, we did to the earth, butchered and milked it. Few of us knew what the bird calls meant or what the fires were saying. We took of earth and took and took, and the earth seemed not to mind until one of our daughters shouted, "It was right in front of you, right in front of your eyes, and you didn't see." The air turned red. The ocean grew teeth. What the Earth Seemed to Say is the title of this Bloodaxe book. And this was written in 2020 when so much of the world, so much of us had withdrawn from the world into our homes, apartments, caves, tents. And this is what the Earth seemed to say during that time. Do you still believe in borders? Birds soar over your maps and walls, and always have. You might have watched how the smoke from your own fires traveled on wind you couldn't see, wafting over the valley and up and over the hills, and over the next valley and the next hill. Did you not hear the animals howl and sing? Or hear the silence of the animals no longer howling? Now you know what it is to be afraid. You think this is a dream? It is not a dream. You think this is a theoretical question? What do you love more than what you imagine is your singular life? The water grows clearer, the swans settle and float there. Are you willing to take your place in the forest again, to become loam and bark, to be a leaf falling from a great height, to be the worm who eats the leaf and the bird who eats the worm? Look at the sky. Are you willing to be the sky again? You think this lesson is too hard for you. You want the time out to end. You want to go to the movies as before, to sit and eat with your friends. It can end now, but not in the way you imagine. You know, the mind that has been talking to you for so long, the mind that can explain everything. Don't listen. You were once a citizen of a country called I don't know. Remember the boat that brought you there? It was your body. Climb in. And the last poem I'd like to read today is called Hymn, Hymn, a song, a praise song. I think of William Blake, the great visionary and poet, who said, "What is now proved was once only imagined." And how difficult it is for us to imagine what seems impossible, how foolish we feel, how unsophisticated to imagine the world we actually want to live in. So there's a great, great poem by Derek Walcott called "The Season of Phantasmal Peace." I urge you to go and look at it. And it's a vision. It's a beautiful vision. And I've carried it in my heart for 40 years. And it helped it inspired this foolish poem called Hymn. It began as an almost inaudible hum, low and long for the solar winds and far dim galaxies. A hymn growing louder for the moon and the sun, a song without words, for the snow falling, for snow, conceiving rain, the rivers rushing without shame, the hum turning again higher into a riff of ridges, peaks hard as consonants, summits and praise, for the rocky faults and crust and crevices, then down to the roots and rocks and burrows, the lakes, skittery surfaces, wells, oceans, breaking waves, the salt deep, the warm bodies moving within it, the cold deep, the deep underneath, gleaming. Some of us rising as the planet turned into dawn, some lying down as it turned into dark. As each of us rested, another woke, standing among the cast-off cartons and automobiles. We left the factories and stood in the parking lots, left the subways and stood on the sidewalks, in the bright offices, in the cluttered yards, in the farmed fields, in the mud of the shanty towns, breaking into harmonies we had not known possible, finding the chords as we found our true place, singing in a million keys, the human hymn of praise for every something else there is and ever was and will be, the song growing louder and rising. Listen, I too believed it was a dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. We're now going to hear again from Philip Gross.
Thank you. After that magnificent sweep, this will be largely one of those small voices I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
The best times, I think, as an author are when you don't feel like an author at all. With what I'm about to read now, I feel and felt more like a host. These aren't translations unless you can be translating from the voice of a character in a novel you never did write. All I knew about this character, Evie, was that she was an Estonian writer who had fallen silent at exactly the time when writers were no longer being silenced. The most recent occupation had come to an end. Well, the novel stayed obstinately silent, but a few years on, prose poems started arriving, about 100 of them, of the kind I looked at and thought, this is not what I write. This is a sample of that particular otherness. When I was small, I ran into the forest. No one came to find me. I lay in a heap of pine needles. Maybe the ants consumed me. I can't tell. My parents still don't know a thing about this. As far as they know, what walked out of the forest, what sat down with her dolls in the sandpit, was a little girl. Wind blows, the rain comes over and people with it, blowing west out of chill steppe, blowing east again. They're like us, these shapes in the rain, but grey-faced, bent at the wind's angle. They pass through us and among us, rain through mist. Yes, to them, we're mist people, rising from the damp earth, fading, never quite there when they speak. One substance, them, us, water mainly, but how to grasp each other, ours, the language of mist's eternal afterthought, theirs, the language of the driven rain. There are walls in the air. First, they build one. Then they tell you it's not there, never was. The word wall is your own invention. You might not believe them, quite, but can you walk through where it isn't? No. This was an early lesson. Nothing, you say, if not trite. It's not trite. Therefore it must be nothing. Like that wall. The crows are charred remnants of a flock of birds of many colours, the only survivors of the day when fire got out of hand. The sarcasm we hear in their voices might be a warning. Not necessarily for us, still we'd be wrong to ignore them. They are evidence. They are fingerprints that hop and fly. They could land anywhere, incriminate anyone, including you. Mother sent me to smiling lessons in the church hall. A youth leader ran them. He knows how to do it, she said. He's read all the books. I stopped in the doorway. You could come too, I said. Too late for that, said Mother. You, though, there's still hope. You can do it for us all if you get in practice young. The old man had a steam machine, half traction engine and half kitchen stove. He called it Moloch, half fond, half appalled by it, like someone adopted for better or worse by a terrible dog. He fed it papers, page after page of his great unpublished novel, and wrote more and fed it night after night after night. He turned grey with it. His hair was ash already. Then one night his drawer was empty and he went out empty-handed. After that, we'd hear it roaring in the dark without him. It had started hunting for itself. You can put up a fence in the forest, angle steel posts barbed wickedly. That sorts out the quick from the dead, the ones who only stand and gaze, the ones who walk straight through. Just ask yourself before you do it. Will you sleep easier once you know who is who? The sea froze. It got cold so fast that rows of foam frets stopped in mid-curl without falling. From a high tree I saw shipwrecks, people just abandoning their small boats, overboard and hanging in the ice froth. At first I thought that it would save them, but no, it only meant that they would always be drowning, never drowned. Progress is a cargo cult on this island where nothing much moves. It comes gleamy, slightly battered from the container washed up by the storm. We can see its machinery, white goods. The packet shows a happy family, but where to plug them in? The manual seems to talk of something quite else, a kind of power tool. Should it ever get started, I can see that it has teeth. The ones who've gone, first there's a silence in their places, then it closes over, until soon you don't even see the blind spots in your sight. Only you can feel something has leached out of things, out of people even that remain. When I was a child, I'd suck a slice of watermelon gently for the longest time, till only the crisp, pale, dry shape of its flesh was left in my hands, and suddenly feel sorry for it or to it in the way that history does not. As I said, none of this has been my father's memories, but I'd like to end with this one, which is obliquely a memory of him. After all, I owe Estonia to him. Aside at the path or stream side, between lichen-haired stones, the corner of whatever vision, wood sorrel. See the way the shut books of its leaf folds tentatively open, or the implications in its petals of pink purple that the nearly summer sky has this far north, just fringing it at 2 a.m. That's both the old day leaving and a new one already here. Or its slow lightening to white in veins not quite too fine to see. Wood sorrel. Leaf and flower nobody thinks to eat till someone's fingertips have confided a pinch to their hands, someone they trust. A taste that's almost no taste, tart edge to whatever walk or work has dulled in you, whatever thirst a little slaked, whatever hunger just made clearer, sourness touched so lightly it's a blessing. If the best of silence could translate to taste, it tastes like this.
Thank you, Philip. Well, I feel as though we've been hearing lost voices there speaking through you, the lost voice of Evie. And we're now going to turn to lost voices speaking through David Constantine in his translations. David, would you like to come in?
I'd first like to thank both of you for those readings. It's completely extraordinary. They feel very congenial to me as when I read them and listening to them there, the poems from Marie and Philip, deeply congenial. It's a fact about life on the Greek islands even now that you wait till the winter is over and then put out to sea in your boats. And there are an awful lot of poems in the Greek anthology are precisely for that time when they can go out again between the islands, crisscrossing across the Aegean, which was deeply dangerous. And an awful lot of Greek anthology poems are in fact about the drowned. I suppose throughout the book, there's a kind of tendency towards the end to get, as it were, more like our time, and in that sense, more pessimistic. And the poem that actually finishes my selection of the Greek anthology is anonymous, and it's one that has been picked up throughout and then differently rewritten as times worsen. Our soothsayers mumble nothing we don't know. The swallows are fewer, and some arriving die. Singles repair the homes of a year ago. Piteous their hope. Our priests look no one in the eye. All see the signs, and none know what they mean. It is Persephone's advent, but we hear of meadows that are not fit to be seen by the sun or moon. Zephyrus falters, the slant hail blows. We know it is time to weigh anchor again, loose the hawsers, open the sails. But look there, another eyeless dolphin has washed in. Can it be that everywhere is much like here? The ancient Greeks engaged in a very great deal of warfare as well. Bloody, but as it were, not accoutred with the weaponry that we have now. Here's a four-liner on the subject of war that has arrived where it hadn't previously been. Anonymous again. Smoke wreaths your lovely river. Your trees are felled. You'll want for shade. Where shall the sweet birds build? The wolves are shepherding in your sheep. All hard to bear, these things, not having been done to you before. There are some lovely poems in the anthology about kindness to animals that have worked for you in the fields, or animals that were a pet, birds and animals. This is by Elaeus of Macedon. When his labouring ox was worn out by old age and the furrows, Alcon, reverencing him for his service, led him not to the slaughter, but to a meadow of deep grass. There, how this fellow creature, when Alcon strolls out to visit him at the hour of shadows, in grateful delight lifts up his head and bellows. The whole collection is called bird called Elaeus, and the actual what that bird was is not quite sure. Various classicists and ornithologists have given it one name or another. I like best the title or subtitle of this poem by a poet called Timnaes, and he says the subtitle is On an Unknown Bird Called Elaeus. He writes of the loss of a bird called Elaeus. The Graces nurtured her, and like the halcyon singing, she made a calm around her in the sea. She had sweet breath. She loved the light of the sun. He mourns the departure of a gentleness that we can't even put a name to, and no one supposes she would have tarried long with us. The female writer most represented in the anthology altogether, and in fact, again, it's one of those miraculous lastings, because most of female Greek and Greek poetry is gone. There's a vast amount of it, a colossal amount of it. Anite of Tegea occurs, I think, 14 times in the anthology, and I've got quite a. In fact, I made a point of when a female writer was there, I put into my anthology everything that was extant. So here she is, Anite of Tegea. And this is, I suppose, a poem about the loss of well, it is the poem about the loss of a pet. You, my dawn caller, I could not wake without. Oh, my red and golden herald, my chanticleer. Now the fox, while you were sleeping, has ripped your throat. I wake in the silence, in your absence, at your hour. There's a very great deal of love poetry in the anthology too, and again, it's set against things which are not that at all. Violence and an awful lot of killing. I mean, killing, wars between one polis and another, bloody in the extreme. Here's a short poem, Thallus by Thallus of Miletus. Over the lovers and their mysteries, the green plane tree extends its whispering boughs, and these are threaded through with an interfingering vine, and this lets down black grapes into easy reach. Allow your devotees in hiding, here a stay of time, Cypris. On the shores of the Greek islands, of many of them, particularly in classical times, a temple would have been raised, and the ruins are still often there to be seen, raised to Aphrodite, particularly in her function of, in some way, protectress of people putting out to sea. Oh, sorry, 45. By Antipater of Sidon. Knowing your likings, we have enthroned you here in a simple house on a bar of sand, near as we dare to the breakers in the very din of them. For this, goddess of the wide and fickle sea, watch over us. Bid the winds remember how easily we drown. Fetch us home from the grey-blue waters safe and sound with our scant livings. Lady of the shore, hearten the wives, the mothers, the widows, watching us in. An awful lot of poems celebrating and memorializing the death of people one loved. And this one, I think, is a particularly touching one, since it's a child, and the child is rowed to Hades like an ancient grown man or woman. Zonus of Sardis, he's called, also called Diodorus. Dour ferryman, coming for the child Euphorion, when you hush your prow through the reeds and touch the shore, be kind. His father, standing in the muddy shallows, will hand him up the plank. Reach down, Charon, bring him carefully on board. Those are his first sandals, his pride and joy, but his footing in them is still unsure. And finally, another sea one. And again, the sanctuary of Cyprus of the sea. Monascalas is the author of this. When let, they will go again and watch till the falling tide allows them to paddle down that long, low spit of land as far as the sanctuary of Cyprus of the sea, and halt like children there in silence, hand in hand, and watch the kingfishers flitting to the lip of her well, whose waters through the salt rise sweet and plentiful into the shadow of the whispering black poplar tree. So they will watch the quick birds drink in the time allowed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And now we're all going to come together to have a discussion. And also, I see that we've got an international audience with us tonight. I see Penelope Shuttle in Cornwall saying hello, Jane Clark in Ireland, Eleanor Hooker, Tipperary, and also two people in the States. We've got Lisa Wolfe Francis, North Carolina, and Deborah Boulder, Colorado. And I'd just like to also say that Marie's book, What the Earth Seemed to Say, New and Selected Poems, is published in the States as New and Selected Poems. So any American readers who are watching this, it's not another book. It is the same book, but it's the book, it's the edition that we've published here with that beautiful cover that you saw. And also, if you're wanting to buy the books aren't actually published until later in November, but we've had to time tonight's event for a date that all three of our authors could take part in. But you can order them already from our website. And if you scroll down, you can order them direct from the website. If you scroll down on the YouTube page below the screen, you'll find the ordering links there. So I do encourage you to do that. Wow, what a diverse and wonderful reading we've just had. Really remarkable. And so many correlations between books that seem so different, particularly in relation to the care for the earth, which is something that's come through all of you, and also other voices coming through you. I was wondering whether Marie perhaps could kick things off by giving us her sense of all that.
Well, I felt it so much reading the books of the other two poets here. It's, how do I say? We are that part of the living earth that speaks in poetry. I mean, we are the earth too. I think I forget it all the time. So the earth is speaking through us all the time, no matter what we're saying. But certainly it is the most precious and pressing situation that's going on right now. I loved, I just want to say for each of you, David, I was hoping you would read the poem about the lion coming into the flock with the shepherds. Just struck me as, I've done terrible things to your books. I've turned down all the corners that you're not supposed to do, but both of you. But I love that poem about, I don't know if we're allowed to ask for requests, but I would love to hear that. And also with Philip, my God, you make silence hearable. How do you do that? You do it through the entire book, a little family of silences, as you say. But just again, I've just starred and checked and bent pages. But if I could have one request, it would be that you would just read the very beginning of your book that begins with "not far and not near."
Mm.
Just that first,
Mm.
even that first stanza would be
Mm.
my request. Because both of these poems hold what is very seldom spoken of.
Mm.
And they touch me deeply.
Do you think when the moment comes and it's not yet, it would be a tidy, courteous way of ending the evening to have one last poem each?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. If you're able to find the place in the course of the discussion.
Oh yeah, yes, yes, yes. Yeah, you know, I could, very easily ask Marie if she wouldn't mind reading any one of her poems from the life of Mary.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Even
I'm
though
glad.
that's right in the middle of the book,
Sure, sure.
how you kind of scan to find which is the door that'll particularly enter and let you in. And
That's
I
beautiful.
went everywhere else after that, but that's what let me in.
Oh, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Mm. But on the question of other voices, I'm really curious to ask each of you questions about that. I know that Marie, you very often work with a voice of a character who we think we recognize, be it Mary or Magdalene or Persephone or Gretel, though
Mm.
you always surprise us once you get inside there. But I think my question is whether you feel you are inhabiting those voices or whether those voices are inhabiting you.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Does that question make sense?
Of course it does. Of course it does. I feel, where the Hudson River meets the sea, the ocean. It's brackish water there, right? It's salt and not salt. And I
Mm.
feel that that's what a lot of these poems are. There's a kind of seawater meeting fresh water, if you will. So that there's, but so there's, of course, it's concerns I carry in my own troubled heart, and also these gorgeous voices of these archetypes, who have very specific things to say. Um, uh, but I also feel like every poem is in a voice that comes through me. I feel like I have very little to say, that the poem has something to say,
Mm.
usually.
Can I
Something
just
to
can I
share.
just interrupt with that topic there? Marry the Willows.
Oh, yeah,
Now
exactly.
that's
I,
it's not an ancient Greek poem, but it's of exactly the same sort of feeling down for what is there, and obviously owing it a life and receiving life from
mm,
it. I it's called The Willows, and you won't mind my reading.
I'd love
No,
to hear you
no,
read it in
no.
your beautiful voice.
As we are made by what moves us, willows pull the water up into their farthest reach, which curves again down, divining where their life begins. So under travels up and down and up again, and the wind makes music of what water was. I am
Good.
great.
This
Mm.
gave me chills.
Really good.
Oh, no.
Gorgeously read. Thank you. I'm so glad you liked that poem. I love that poem too because of
Mm.
because of what it represents. But that came, whoop, who knows who wrote that? I mean,
Mm. Mm.
David, could you perhaps say something about the contemporary echoes of some of the poems in your selection? Because you have weighted the book a lot towards poems that speak to us now, with, like the one of the dolphin being washed up.
Yeah. I've read a lot of ancient Greek literature anyway, but it's this large anthology which makes it clear. Obviously, I've read them all, but I've not absolutely translated. I mean, it's a tiny proportion that I've read, but the recurrent topics they're very close to what the law still is. That is to say, do this and it's our ruin. And then people go and do it. There's a very famous one, which isn't, it's actually in Ovid, about Erysichthon, who actually chopped down, just for a kind of bet really, or just to prove he could do it, the tree of Demeter. He just chopped it down. And immediately the repercussions of that, which are in his case absolutely awful and deservedly lethal, begin. He becomes hungry. She makes him permanently and insatiably hungry. And that takes the form of eating everything within his own domain. He eats everything that people are growing for him. And then when that's exhausted, he sends out the carts to all domains that he's got any influence over, and they bring it in by the cartload. And in the end, all that's gone. And the poem finishes with him eating himself. That is to say, he begins with his mouth and starts eating from the feet up. And if you wanted, I mean, that's just it really of what we are in danger. In fact, already, as it were, doing. The Greeks were by no means well behaved the whole time, but they had very definite ideas of what you must not do, which absolutely didn't mean that people didn't go and then do it. They did. There were laws of war which were continually set aside. And in the midst of all that, though, there are these, and you see it still in modern Greece, if you get up high enough, there are paths there which are made of marble. Marble is laid down slab by slab as though walking were an honourable and fit thing for a human being to be doing, passing from one village to the next, going up, going across and down. And these marble paths have marble fountains still from way back. So you see all sorts of things which are deeply satisfying, and there is a continuity in that. You also see landscapes trashed beyond words, absolutely trashed beyond all speaking, to get richer, or to bring some money into impoverished islands. They would do absolutely anything to get the tourists in. Large areas of it. And when we first started going there was this thing called the nephos, which was this toxic cloud over Athens. And as you pushed off away from it, in one of the forests, you look back and you saw this yellowy black elongated cloud over Athens. It's not quite gone yet. So all I'd say, I may have said too much already, is that there's a very great deal in Greece now which takes you right back to ancient Greece, and there's a modernity which is well, we know there are fires all over the place now, as there are in much of the Mediterranean and into Asia as well. So, and that's I suppose what I felt doing these things. It is very close to us still.
I was quoting those rules of war to some friends yesterday from your poems. David, poison no wells, don't bomb any hospitals, don't bomb schools,
That's the modernity of it. That's precisely
Yes,
what's happened in the Iraq war and is now happening all at
In
Gaza, and
I know.
they've done it all. They've done it all multiple times.
Yeah,
They've
it's just
transgressed absolutely and totally, and with a colossal variety of transgression.
Yeah.
Can I just bring in another aspect to your book, David, that hasn't come out so far in the reading, but in terms of bringing things very much up to date, you have a coda at the end, which is drawn from partly from your reading of Brecht and his own reading of the Greek anthology, translated into German, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Would you like to say something about that aspect of the book too?
Well, that was where I started reading the Greek anthology an awful long time ago, but not very long before I was studying Brecht and came across this note in his diaries when he was in exile in Finland, then, of his son giving him a copy, a small digest of the Greek anthology in German. And he was very, very taken with precisely what has touched me throughout, um, the sowness of it, the concreteness of it, and the concision of it, this extraordinary gift of getting things into four-liners, which are saying everything that was wanted to be said in that particular form and what the intended saying was. And he started using these in a book, which he was an obsessive collector of cuttings from newspapers and magazines throughout the war and beyond. He was in exile from 33 till 47, 48. And he devised a thing of pictures cut out of magazines and paper, and then he would write a quatrain underneath it. So you've got a double form of art, because you've got the photo, you've got the original language around it saying that this was from in Danish or German or French or whatever, and then underneath is this very neat quatrain, pithy beyond words and very, very telling. And these ended up in a book called The War Primer, which he published War Primer just before he died. And one of the most touching ones is of four children from four nationalities, and underneath it is a quatrain by Brecht saying that the children are speaking, and they're saying, if you want to see what you've been doing, this is it. You conquered. What did you conquer? You conquered us. And it's a very good and easy, it's lapidary. That's what he liked. And it was very easy. First of all, my quatrains about the Iraq War, largely, when they dug great long trenches to put the natives in, so to speak, and the kill ratio was something off the scale. It's even more off the scale now. So it's easy to shift from that into where we are now.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. Philip, I feel as though we've been neglecting you a bit. Would you like to come in with something?
Oh, because we've heard voices speaking for the earth. I've obviously been running it past myself, whether I suppose that there's that unaccountable voice of Evie is in any sense a voice of the earth. If it is, it's not a moralizing one. It's not necessarily a kind one either. It's certainly about all sorts of resilience, but it can be spiteful as well. If anyone here knows the novels of Tove Jansson, I mean, children's books, but actually books for everybody. There's a character translated in English as Little My, who is wicked in a most creative way, and there's a bit of her there. I feel kind of paralyzed by trying to write what I imagine to be the forces of good. I'm much more likely to be stimulated and and excited by voices which actually offend me slightly, because I can be quite pious and I need offending in good creative ways. Uh, so, I mean, in a sense, I think we all would like to help amplify the voices of the earth now. I do teach on the poetry and art course, which is called Voices of the Earth. And I feel very committed to the idea that that's voices plural. I don't think it's anymore within our imagination to grasp a single voice of the earth. And I suspect if we could, we might be not exactly appalled by it, but so overawed by it, we wouldn't see it as either good or bad. You know, much as in a different language you might say about God. Um, it would be beyond us. I do incidentally think that the earth will look after itself, but it doesn't have any particular interest in looking after us if we're so darned careless.
Yeah, I agree.
Should we finish off with a poem each? Because we've had some requests. Is it possible, sort of, to if you could look them up quickly and see what we could do? Would you be able to do that opening part of that poem, Philip?
Just that's easy because it's the first one in the book, if I'm right. Okay. This is the only one that was actually written in Estonia, by the way. The old country. Not far and not near, scarcely sound, more a hitch in the hush that insists until I stop my breath and listen. Something like a long-held breath, released, small and distinct, particular. The storm moved over last night, letting the sea down again, that Baltic flatness slightly darkened with a battered look, while here in the summer-house garden, May sun is teasing up wisps from the eaves, and from the cut ends in a log pile so perfectly end-stopped, with such understanding of each log's different place together, that a night of storm is nothing but steam rising. That and the honey-tart tang of pine sap reawakening, and that sound, which is this year's new wasp, bent to its diligence, scraping a track in the wood, straight, pale, already digesting to paper spit pulp, to nest, to layers of inwardness, chamber into chamber, word of mouth, recollecting itself, almost weightless. So little can stand for so much. That sound for log pile, for resin smell, for then, for morning after, for that old small country. Close my eyes from the sun, and there's the woodshed in blue shadow, as if the storm had kept on coming, and this low and level only just to land was seabed again. All this clear, framed as a deep dive camera's eye might catch 100-year-old wreck beneath the ice. Inside the porthole, tables laid. There might be music playing, if we could just be still enough to hear.
Thank you, Philip. David, if you've got the lion poem to hand, but if not, maybe something from the coda.
Yeah, I've got the lion poem. Yeah.
That would be great.
This is a poem by Leonidas of Tarentum. He's a frequent author in the anthology. That wintry night through driving hail, fleeing the snow and the killing cold, a solitary lion, stricken in all its limbs, entered the fold of goatherds who go sure-footedly across sheer faces. They then ceased caring about their herd and sought salvation by Zeus for themselves instead. But the lion, beast of the night, done in, head on his paws, lay only waiting out the weather, and at break of day, and harming not one of the goats or frightened men, limped from the fold. The glad humans drew a telling picture of what they had come through on this oak's good trunk for the mountaineer, Pan.
Marie, can you think of what would you like to finish off with?
Well, I'll read one of the Mary poems. I grew up in a large Catholic family, and I wrote Christmas plays and made my sisters and brothers be in them growing up. And my faith, of course, has changed radically from those days, but I love Mary. Meister Eckhart, the great mystic, said, perhaps Jesus is the fruit of Mary's enlightenment, which I love to say. And he also suggests that each of us can become the mother of God. When he says God, and when I say God, I mean nothing that could ever be. It's sort of very close to what Philip was referring to, the unutterable isness of reality. So here's Mary's trying to speak about the Annunciation. Even if I don't see it again, nor ever feel it, I know it is, and that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as towards a place, but it was a tilting within myself. As one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't, I was blinded like that and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one. And so specifically myself, I thought I'd die from being loved like that.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Marie. And thank you, Philip. And thank you, David. And thank you, everyone watching tonight's event. I do hope you want to order the books. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Bye.